Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hi. I'm checking that we have every guest as a speaker and that everyone is connected.
Hello.
Hello. Could I ask every speaker just to say something so we check that everything is working?
GM.
Hi, everyone.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
Okay, everything is working. That's cool. So I think we will wait a couple of minutes while people are joining, and at the same time, I will briefly introduce what is happening today and why we are all here. Today, we are having a chat about intents, a pretty mysterious topic still for most people in the area and definitely outside of it. So today we are going to shed a bit of light on what intents are, how they work, and maybe get some interesting insights, interesting ideas. So let's start with a quick introduction. Could I ask all the speakers to briefly introduce yourself and also to briefly introduce your project and explain how it is related to intents? Whoever would like to start.
Yeah, I think I can go first here. So my name's Ken, or you can call me Kenny as well. So I come from the Taiko team, mainly doing ecosystem and as well as BD and partnerships. So I mean, I mean, we all kind of know what Taiko is. Really, what Taiko is doing to enable more things in intent-based architecture space is really to support builders and DApps, building these awesome applications and use cases for intents. So, and yeah, Taiko is a zkEVM layer 2. And yeah, we're very excited to be here and talk more about intents and learn more here.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anton from 1inch. I'm here to discuss intents. I believe it will be a very interesting discussion. Probably we will understand better what is intents and what's actually happening on the market.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a couple of words about what is 1inch Fusion and what is the role of intents there, so we have some context.
Okay, shortly. I thought it was a short intro, but yeah. Okay, 1inch for almost 1 year have 1inch Fusion. That's a special mode which allows users to trade their assets by providing just their signature. And now the modern way to call this is intent. But we're also working internally on intents protocol. But I believe this shouldn't be a secret that a lot of companies nowadays are working on own vision of intents protocols. That's because no one clearly understands what it is, and every developer have own opinion on this. And I believe in half a year or maybe in 1 year, we will see like tens of intents protocols, and market will decide which of them are more intent than any other one, which of them are more abstract and suitable or gas efficient or anything like that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's go further.
Yeah, I can go next. So I'm Chen, have been with the CowSwap team for the last more than 3 years, I think, mainly focused on business development and ecosystem. And yeah, maybe a little bit about CowSwap, I guess the aspect of intents. So Cow protocol in the existing version is running for more than 2 years, and mainly the team is mainly focused in that regard on auction mechanisms to allow not just for users to express their trading intents, but also for solvers or those sophisticated players within the system to use those intents to maximize user benefit. And one of the unique ways this happens on Cow protocol is via batching. So multiple user intents can be settled in a single batch. Yeah, I guess we can continue talking about it later in the call.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Christopher.
Hey, I'm Christopher from Anoma. Great to see everyone, and thank you for hosting this. Anoma sort of has been working on intents for a little while, and we arrived at the concept just by trying to understand what these distributed blockchain systems, cryptographic systems would look like from a user's perspective, in particular, what users kind of want and how they would see the system, and trying to generalize that intuition and turn it into a kind of mathematical expression that can be used to kind of check that we're designing a protocol that does what people want and that behaves in the way that they expect. So, the word intent has become popular recently, and I think people to use it to mean a lot of different things. In the way we use it, for example, it includes things like heterogeneous trust, so users being able to express trust preferences, and information flow control, users being able to express in their intents, where they do and do not want information to go. So yeah, I'm excited to explore sort of different definitions of intents and also the ways in which our various protocols can perhaps interoperate and collaborate.
Awesome. Thank you for introductions. And before we start, I would like to introduce a framework we use today. First, all the questions will be addressed to everyone, as the topic is not easy. So whoever feels comfortable answering the question, just feel free to take it. And the second thing is that if you have any questions to each other, feel free to ask them as well. And let's start with the very basics, even though for such a topic as intents, the very basics can be still very tricky. So let's start with what is an intent, how it differs from transaction, and are intents and transactions complementary, or one might expect intents to replace transactions one day.
Oh, I'm happy to take a stab at this.
Please.
If no one else wants to. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of sometimes not you, of course, but sometimes this question is framed as intents versus transactions. And I think that can perhaps be a little bit misleading. At least I would see them as a spectrum. So intents constrain less, right? They express preferences over the state space, and they allow users to declare constraints, but they don't specify exactly what sequence of state changes must happen. They specify many sequences of state changes that would be considered by the intent to be valid. And transactions, at the other end of the spectrum, specify an exact sequence of state changes. So there's a lot of stuff in the middle, and a lot of the stuff in the middle is probably also interesting. Do we call it an intent or do we call it a transaction? Well, it kind of depends more on your mathematical definitions, than the English words. I mean, I'm excited about intents as a paradigm insofar as It's a kind of conceptual and mathematical recognition of how users want to articulate their preferences. They don't want necessarily to specify an exact sequence. They want more to specify constraints, like I must get at least 5 tokens, and preferences like I want more tokens rather than less, right? Those are some simple ones. I think that speaking of intents replacing transactions is kind of like maybe not, at least that's not the way I would think about it. I would think about kind of the kinds of intents which users express. Transactions are just a very restricted kind of intent, right? I would think of the kinds of intents which users express over time becoming a bit more flexible and more general. And some of those will look more like transactions today, and some of them won't. And as long as they're interoperable, everyone's happy.
So, do you understand you correct that intents, in your vision, will become more what users order, and transactions might be what is in between intents?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, in the sort of database sense of transaction, at least, there have to be determinate state changes. Like, you have to agree on how the state actually changed. Maybe you could design some interesting quantum superpositional protocol where you don't even have to do that, but no one's talking about those yet. So for now, there will be some transactions at the end, but users may not be articulating those directly. They may be articulating intents, which are then combined, solved, and turned into some subsequent combination of transactions.
Okay, makes sense. Does anyone want to add something to intent definitions?
Yeah, let me add shortly that I consider intents protocols as a separation of intentions and settlements, because originally users of blockchain, they executed transactions on their own, and they specified all exact steps what should happen inside those transactions. And intents is separation of their intention and the settlement. In other words, users will define what they want, but not how they want to achieve it.
That sounds clear.
I think I can add here as well. And compared to our esteemed speakers here, I think my knowledge base would be sort of in like the novice or amateur range. But to put it shortly and kind of in the way I understand it, I think intent is architecture for the next age in terms of simplifying UI and UX. So what intent is, and I'll take an analogy here to make it kind of easier, is it's sort of like your travel agency, right? If I say that, hey, I want to go to this specific country, I want to go to Europe, I only have $2,000. You take care of the tickets, you take care of where I want to go, you take care of my hotel, everything. You take care of it from point A to point B, and I don't care. I'll do it. But instead of you paying the travel agency more, you're actually getting more benefit out of it. So you're getting better UI UX, you're getting possibly cheaper fees, gas fees, and so on, right? So I think like this is a good example to keep an analogy for intents. It's not as technical. It's the way I kind of understand intents. And the way I sort of see it within specific use cases is that it revolutionizes certain aspects of a transaction. So if we're thinking about a specific comparison, I would say like intent-based architecture is sort of like account abstraction for wallets or protocols, but it's going to be in the transaction level, meaning that you're sort of abstracting the complexities of transactions. So instead of having to swap to sign a lot of things, as Anton I think mentioned, like you're not worrying about like how to do it, but just expressing your intent that, hey, I want to swap this, right? And you have actual people who do it for you in the sense of travel agents. They're called solvers. And this is applied to many facets and many use cases. But, in this terms, I think it's going to be like for trading. So you have like solvers, which are in this case probably market makers that execute the transaction for you. So that's in a sense like intent-based architecture, an example of it, and how I kind of see it in my own little way.
Okay, nice. Now we are. It's a bit clearer, I guess, with the definitions. And let's talk a bit about technical realization. In particular, like it's all very nice if whatever the intent is, it can be executed. But how do intents work under the hood? That is, what is the intent lifecycle? And maybe what is more interesting, how the preference matching mechanism can be realized. Maybe how it is done currently in your products, or just like some options that might be possible.
I can start on it. That's definitely an interesting question, because it is more about what are the features of intents and what they should have and should not have, probably. I have some ideas. It's not final yet, and some of them are still kind of under discussion. So I think that they should be intents, intent protocol. It should be kind of reentrancy friendly. I mean, you should be, solvers should be able to execute, fulfill multiple intents at once. And it's very likely it should be done nested. I mean, if you look at simplest intents which already exist for many years, it's basically limit orders. When users sign their intention to exchange one asset to another asset, they give permission for arbitrary executor to take one of their assets and want to get another assets back at some specific rate or at some variable rate, or it could be Dutch auction or anything else. And it's clear that those intents should be field nested. I mean, it should be possible to get a lot of different assets from a lot of different users, then do something with them, and then finalize transaction by unbubbling all these nested calls. One more thing, I would like to see that intents will be finally something which can be referenced to, because limit orders are not like that. So, for example, I believe it should be possible to reference intents in other intents. I mean, you could make intent which depends on another intent, or intent which is paying for fulfilling another intent. I mean, it should be possible that someone create intent without spending anything, just want to make something to happen, and someone else could make dependent intent which pays for execution of the first intent. And this could be flow that users, for example, in some wallet, they create transaction, but they they create intent, they sign intent, but they have no ability to pay for this execution for some reason. And they could pay in different way. I mean, they could pay to wallet via Apple Pay, and wallet could issue own intent to pay for the execution of original intent. And wallet still can work without being a solver. So solver could be someone else. And I'm afraid that we still need to take care about partial fields of intents. So some of intents should support partial fields, and this is what should be in intents protocol. So I'm not sure if this could be avoided and implemented somewhere else. It probably should be right in the intents protocol. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. Someone else wants to add?
Yeah, I think I will add a little bit. So first of all, I agree that the concept of limit orders obviously exists for a very long time, and essentially the most common intent today are just in a way limit orders, or this is how the user expresses them. They describe an outcome they want to achieve, and then they add some constraint or a minimum amount they are willing to accept. This is in a sense, the limit order. But I think one aspect or one important aspect is who is getting the authorization of the user to actually fulfill the intent, and the user must choose those entities quite carefully in order to make sure that they actually optimize for the best outcome for the user. And this is not trivial. This is, I think, what we are trying to solve for. As in the past, users were, submitting those transactions, and then arbitrary people or entities could take those transactions and obviously not care about the user outcome at all. So the mechanism that is being used in order to pick the solver in this case, or this is how we call them, that is going to execute the user intent is very important. And this is, I think, one of the main areas where we can still innovate and make sure that users can actually rely on those mechanisms and use them to express their intent and also be confident that they will be executed at their best interest.
That's interesting, but could I ask you something else? As CowSwap is working for quite a while already, and let's assume that there are several users who want to make some swaps. These swaps do not coincide, so it's not A for B, B for A. It's like something more complicated, but definitely the amount that people want to swap, it never coincides because, for obvious reasons. So could you tell us a bit about the mechanism behind literally intent execution, like how it is matched with the best option?
Right. So in Cow protocol, there is the notion of we call it objective criteria. It's the way that a given solution is being ranked, and it's quite simple today. It sums up the price improvement that each of the orders that are included in this batch are actually getting over the restriction or the constraint, the minimum amount that the user is willing to accept. And the sum is representing, in a sense, the score of the batch. And obviously, as the score is higher, it means overall the users in the batch should be happier. One tricky part is that in some scenarios, maybe one user is a little bit happier, but the other user might be actually a little bit worse off, and still this solution might win. So there are a lot of things to take into account when designing this kind of mechanisms.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm sure you have something to add about intent execution mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, I think these descriptions are already fantastic. The way we define things, just to break it down a little bit more, we separate intents into two parts, which we call constraints and preferences. So constraints in your intent are conditions which unless they are satisfied, your intent won't be settled at all. So you can be quite sure, like even if some solver doesn't like you very much, if you constrain your intent such that you won't allow it to be valid unless you get at least 5 ETH, then you'll always get at least 5 ETH if the intent is settled, or nothing will happen, right? The protocol enforces that. So this is a little bit similar to slippage limits on AMMs, right? If you set a slippage limit, your transaction won't complete at all if you don't get at least as much as the minimum. Now you might still pay gas, and one nice thing about intents is that you can typically avoid even paying gas if your constraints are not met. You can offload the execution risk. Now, the second part of an intent is preferences, and preferences are things that you would prefer that you don't necessarily want to put in the constraint. For example, you want at least 5 ETH, but you'll be happier if you get 5.1 ETH, similar to the example speakers have already given. Now, these you can't enforce sort of in the intent exactly. You can send the intent to something like CowSwap, which uses its own ranking algorithm. But I think the other thing that will be very important, as was alluded at, is users measuring solvers after the fact. As in, when I have my intent, maybe I want to trade, A for B. One thing I could do is split it up into a bunch of smaller trades, send them to different solvers, and see how they perform. And if I'm doing a bunch of trades over time, like I'm frequently doing Forex or something like this, it's in my interest for me to measure the performance of solvers, like how well they satisfy my intent, particularly the preferences part, over time, and switch which solvers I send to based on which ones perform better for me. So I think there's a kind of like feedback. But it turns out when you think in an intent-centric conception of things, where you send your intents to is a really important decision, and you as a user have leverage on the solvers only insofar as you kind of switch depending on how they perform. Another thing that was brought up earlier is how there could be a contest between different user preferences, right? That user A may want more ETH and user B may want more USDC. Solver has an intent from A and an intent from B, even if they're like a nice, selfless, altruistic solver, and they don't take any slippage for themselves, they still can choose between giving A more and giving B more. And not only that, even if they kind of split the difference, like half to user one, half to user two, that's not Sybil resistant, right? Some other user could split up their intents in an attempt to get more of that slippage. So I think one thing, the other thing which intents and this kind of fairness criterion really brings to the forefront is the importance of Sybil resistance or some kind of reputation network in this whole intent system. That's one thing we think about a lot. And I think there's a lot of fertile ground to explore and try different protocol designs. And, there's no one true metric of reputation, right? And to try different ways of giving users a good way to at least semi-automatically decide where to route their intents. If I have to think about this every time I press swap, it's not going to go so well, right? So we want to kind of abstract some of these details from the user, have some much smarter kind of interface that is capable of measuring things and rerouting intents over time, in accordance with the user's stated preferences. So I think there's a lot of interesting work to do there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's like really very, very interesting aspect that we definitely don't want users to choose solvers for each of these intents, but how to assign solvers. Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. But now let's touch a bit UX, a very specific part of UX, that is composability. When we speak about intents and how intents can improve UX, we pretty often mention composability. That is some cross-chain operations. And my question is how this composability can be achieved with intents, and especially with non-Ethereum chains, like, for example, Bitcoin or Solana, who don't post their state chain root to Ethereum.
I previously talked about composability, but I used it in a different meaning. I meant composability of intents. For me, means that intents can be referenced in other intents or any other protocols. Yeah, I'm not sure intents can help with interchain composability or cross-chain. I believe it's probably a problem which should be solved in a DeFi way with other protocols. So the greatest feature of DeFi is composability of protocols. That protocols could work with other protocols, could reference their primitives, and that's how people build. And that's why DeFi is that great, because right on Hackathon you could build permissionlessly smart contracts on top of other smart contracts. You can build protocols on top of existing protocols.
Okay, I could mess things up with composability and cross-chain, my bad. So then we can kind of rephrase the question about how intents relate to different chains. Should we kind of introduce them to each domain, or some aggregation mechanisms can be possible?
Yeah, I'm personally not sure, and hope people will not try to solve cross-chain things on intents protocol level. So I believe that intents are like one chain solution, and they could be easily deployed on every chain, every EVM compatible chain for sure. And yeah, I mean, it could be developed for non-EVM compatible chains, but yeah, if you have developed the protocol for EVM chain, it can be easily deployed to every EVM chain. And yeah, they would work separately. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there are like two kinds of composability that we might be interested in here, which I will differentiate as protocol composability and atomic composability. So by protocol composability, I mean something like protocol compatibility, as in if you have intent systems running in different places, a user is typically going to think about something like assets and security models, right? They have ETH, they want USD, and they want, good enough security for their, for their intent, however they define that. They may not think so much about, which specific rollup they want to swap on or which specific chain they want to get assets on. They just have some constraints. And for that user, it's very helpful if all of these intent protocols are kind of compatible, so that even if it's, their intent might be settled on a different chain or a different rollup or something, but they want to express things in a common format and have that format be, executable or legible to all of these different, specific intent systems or subsystems. So I think that kind of protocol composability is pretty important, and that is certainly a prerequisite for the kind of composability that you see in DeFi. But for intents, it will look different. For DeFi, a lot of the composability is, at least in the sort of Ethereum DeFi ecosystem, is based on the message passing capabilities of the EVM. And although you can compose intents in that way, I also think that we'll see, just because the EVM is kind of transaction centric, I think that we'll see different VMs that have different sort of mechanisms for protocol composability of intents. One of those is the one that we're working on, which we call Taiko. The second question, atomic composability, is more a database question, or even a transaction composability question. And there, you're still limited by how consensus systems work. So if you want atomically to make state changes on, domain A and domain B, you need those two domains to be controlled by the same consensus set. So if those domains are like Ethereum smart contracts, that's on the Ethereum main chain, that's pretty easy because there's one consensus set that produces blocks, and you can have a transaction in a block which does atomic state changes involving two contracts. However, if you want to do atomic state changes involving, one contract on the main chain, one contract on a rollup, or even a contract on the Ethereum main chain and some code on a Cosmos chain or on Bitcoin or whatever, that's pretty much impossible. The best you can do is lock state in one place, lock state in the other, do some kind of multi-phase commit, or transfer state from one to the other and do the atomic operation there. So I do think that intents help with this a little bit, insofar as they allow users to describe what they want, like where they want the assets to be. and solvers or some other party can move assets around in the background to get them there. So this is much more similar to how like the actual financial system works. You don't figure out the routing, right? There are, in fact, many different bank databases. It's probably even messier than roll-up interoperability. But you don't, as a user, you're not really exposed to all of this complexity. You just specify where your assets are and where you want them to be. Or if you're doing a swap, you specify like, I want, USD now because I'm paying the counter and I need to give USD to my counterpart. And the system figures out the routing in the background. So I think intents can be helpful there, but they don't like, atomic composability is just a fundamental distributed systems question. So intents don't provide any magical solution. They might help improve the UX.
So did I understand you right that if the user has an intent of changing some specific amount of ETH for USDC, and currently the best way for it, the best way to do it is to take his ETH on Ethereum and provide him with USDC and match it with USDC on Taiko. It will be up to solver how it will happen.
Yeah, I missed a little bit of that due to internet glitches, but if I understood you correctly, in the case I'm envisioning, the user would articulate some constraints. So they currently have an asset, like they have ETH, and let's say that ETH is on the Ethereum main chain, and they want another asset. They want USDC, and actually they want their USDC like to be sent to Coinbase or something like this, which means that they could execute the swap in principle in many different places, right? Their ETH to USDC on the Ethereum main chain, then send it to Coinbase. They could send their ETH to a rollup such as Taiko, then send it from Taiko to Coinbase if Coinbase supports Taiko, etc. Even other rollups could be involved. The swap could be split up into multiple places, stuff like this. And presumably the user, has some preferences, like they want best execution, they want the best price, they don't want to pay too much in gas fees, and they want the whole operation to be done relatively quickly. They have some kind of time preference. But within those constraints, they probably are flexible about where exactly it happens, and even would prefer that the system does something smart. For example, if I'm a user executing a large swap and there are multiple separate AMM pools on different rollups, I might want that swap split up so it has less price impact. So this kind of automation, intent, just an intent protocol alone doesn't do, but an intent protocol operating from the user interface level plus like a network of solvers and interoperable systems on all of these rollups can automate a lot of that kind of bookkeeping.
I got it. Thank you. Let's now talk a bit about intents economics and in particular intents pricing. How intents can be priced? Is it like paper intent or paper preference execution, and how it might be or will be lower or higher comparing to current transaction fees?
I can start. For me, it seems like the payment for execution intents, it should be already priced in the constraints, as Christopher called it. We at 1inch call them permits and expects. That's what user allow to spend, and that's also what they wish to receive. We call it permits and expects. Christopher called it constraints and preferences. But yeah, it's about the same with different wording. But regarding to the payments for the intents fulfilling, I'm afraid I do not believe that users who create their intents, they should care much about those who will fulfill their intentions. I mean, I believe that this kind of system should be as much permissionless as possible. And it's matter of intent itself to take care of better rate or anything else. I mean, for example, in 1inch Fusion, there is an Dutch auction, which improves price over the time for solvers, and they compete to each other. And whenever for one of them it's became profitable to resolve intent or order, they do it. And competition among resolvers or solvers, it allows users to benefit from better execution. I mean, trying to restrict those who can fulfill such intents will probably bring more problems than benefits. For example, if you try to make a rating system, it will be even worse. I never saw when rating system actually solved anything or simplified. I would say they usually indicate that incentives are insufficient or something like that. So to keep everything simple, I would prefer an intents protocol to be as much permissionless as possible. Yeah, but for sure, intents should allow restricting this. I mean, some specific intent should allow this. If it's I consider intents protocol as a base layer, and other protocols could be built on top of them, like specific intents. For example, like limit order is protocol which could be built on top of intents protocol. And for example, if someone wants to make a private order to be filled by someone specific, for sure it should be available. Yeah, but on ground level, on intents protocol, I think it should be as much permissionless as possible.
Just to clarify a bit, what you mean here by permissionless, and by the fact that rating usually overcomplicate the mechanism. Like, what if it's not the rating mechanism? What like you mentioned Dutch auction that you use.
Yeah,
maybe
I can explain,
you can a bit tell us about like very briefly how Dutch auction works and why it is efficient in this case.
Yeah, I mean, if you have limit order or like you place order where you can spend some amount of rapid Ether for some amount of USDC, in very ground case, intents protocol should not take care of delivering more than what you expect. It should deliver exact amount which you expect. Because when you look at tokens, you think that, okay, amount is something which is desired by user and they wish to get this amount or more. Okay, this could be specific kind of order which allows to deliver more, but there is no clear intent for arbitrary solver to deliver more than you asked for. And just imagine, for example, there are systems with ERC20 tokens of depth. These tokens have negative price. For example, Euler protocol, it's money market where they spread among accounts. They approves works in opposite way for sure. Without a proof, you are not allowing anyone to send you. They have negative price for sure. But if you are trying to swap your debt, for example, you have USDT debt and you want to swap it to USDC debt and you place it as an intent on protocol, you don't want to get more for sure. You want to get less probably. So, I mean, it's a matter of what exactly you are swapping. And if you are swapping NFT token, you don't want to get any other amount, because in terms of ABI encoding, it's the same as ERC20, where amounts are token IDs. No one will be happy if they will get a higher token ID and they will get not NFT they tried to buy, but they will get something else with different ID, which is higher. I mean, intents should take care of specific things which are inside the sub-protocol. I mean, if you have limit order protocol, which is built on top of intents protocol, this limit order protocol could have non-specific amounts. It should be possible. For example, how Fusion works, there is a Dutch auction where user defines initial price for some specific moment, and then this price changes every second, and it getting worse for user, but it improves for solvers. And then when someone decides to fulfill those orders, they fill at that price which exists at this specific moment. Yeah, I mean, taking care of better execution should be taken into account in sub-protocols. You should not restrict those who can solve because you will try to get more. You will think they will provide you more than you have in your order. This works pretty strange for me.
Okay, makes sense. If anyone has an opposite or just different opinion.
Yeah, not an opposite opinion, but just one, aspect that I think is worth bringing to the intense conversation is other stuff besides swaps. So far we've mostly talked about swaps, and while I think people will want to continue to want to do swaps, one thing I'm excited about with Intense is making many more applications feasible, because the execution costs are sort of low or zero if you aren't actually matched. So an example is Uber, or decentralized Uber. So with something like Uber, you are looking to discover a counterparty. If you are a user, you're looking to discover a car that can take you from point A to point B. If you're a driver, you're looking to discover users or riders who will pay you, and you don't want to stay within a certain range, and you want to maximize your hourly revenue or something like this. You may have other preferences. In the current setup, there's this company called Uber, which acts in several roles. Number one, they build the protocols, they build the matching engine, they build the databases, they build the app, they build everything. Number two, they operate solvers basically and settlement. So they operate some database, I don't know what they use, maybe SQL, that they host on servers, and they run a kind of counterparty discovery algorithm between users and drivers. And number three, Uber is basically an insurance agent for both drivers and users in various capacities. And they're not always a good actor, but at least they play this role to some extent. If your car, the first car you order doesn't arrive, you get another one. If something goes wrong, you might get a refund. If someone is acting unsafely, they'll kind of deal with it, or at least nominally try to. So there are a bunch of roles going on there, and an intent-centric protocol may be able to kind of disaggregate and decentralize some of these. So first of all, there could be a protocol for this kind of counterparty discovery and settlement of just ride sharing or kind of logistics that is independent of any particular operator or insurance agent, or sort of Uber is also a ratings agency for drivers, right? And that protocol could be just a common open source public good. So you can have an app that is compatible with a standard ride sharing protocol and use it when you go to different places. But in different places, the actual the cars and maybe the ratings or the insurance may be operated by different sort of specific local parties who have the right local context and are well integrated into local social networks, provide social welfare for the drivers and other stuff like this that one centralized San Francisco company doesn't necessarily do a good job of doing. But one thing that I think is critical to make this application actually work is to have it be relatively easy to send around intents for free. If users have to pay to search for a car on Uber, if I have to pay $2 every time I want to try and see if there's a car, no one is going to use this application, right? It's very annoying. Users feel like they're getting screwed because they pay to search and then there's no car, and then what did they just pay for, right? Whereas if you can send around an intent that says I want a car from A to B, please search for me. And if there's no car, then fine, nothing happens, but you didn't have to pay a fee. I think that subtle, it may seem like a kind of subtle UX distinction, but I think it probably makes the difference between many of these existing applications in the world being feasible to sort of decentralize and disaggregate in this way versus not. So I think that's pretty interesting potential set of
that sounds extremely exciting. Just to be sure, I understand you are describing a like hypothetical application of intents, or someone is already developing that.
We are thinking about it, but we are certainly not like actually doing anything with actual cars. So hopefully some other people will pick up different parts of the work. It's a big effort.
Okay. But that's a very interesting topic, because like within last several years, we like to talk a lot about onboarding next billion. And my question is, you partially already, Christopher partially already answered it, but I will ask it anyway. How intents can, one second. What are the use cases for intents outside blockchain? So that is how intents can help us bring new users into blockchain. Maybe, I don't know, they can even replace money, for example, either in a very like hypothetical or a realistic way, if it is possible, if you think it is possible.
I'll start as usually. Probably SQL query is also intent. That's a way how developers describe what exactly they want to get, but they do not describe how exactly this data should be extracted from a database. That's because they can't do it in an efficient way, because it will be super hard to define exact algorithm of extracting data, especially taking account different indexing, which could speed up this extraction. That's why it's SQL query is a declarative programming language, kind of, which allows users to specify what exactly they wish to get. And they don't specify how it will be extracted from database. Probably it's like example for software engineers.
Makes sense, but is there any reasonable reason to somehow make a transition for this current SQL request execution into blockchain? Can there be any use cases where someone will benefit from it?
Yeah, I mean, if those execution will be, for example, paid. For example, if BigQuery from Google is a huge database with a lot of sources, will move to more decentralized way, they could probably make it intent-based or something. So developers will create intents which pay for the queries or something like that, probably. Or we could also have intents for getting answers from AI models or something like that.
Wow, that's exciting. That's exciting. I have never thought about that. Kenny, Han, do you have anything to add about intents outside of blockchain?
Yeah, so I think one important part in order to make it like more appealing for many use cases is, first of all, allowing the user to describe really what they want to achieve, but then also being able to translate it, the intent into the different parts that could actually be optimized and allow the users to get the best outcome. So, for example, if a user wants to buy an NFT, then the purchase of the NFT itself is a non-fungible position. This is something that as far as my understanding goes, is can't really be optimized. There's not a lot of ways to execute it. It's just buying the NFT. But then if the NFT is listed in USDC, but the user has DAI, and in order to achieve this, there must be also a swap of DAI to USDC, then this outcome that the user is trying to achieve could be split into swap of ERC20 tokens. This is something that fungible and could be optimized for the user to achieve the best outcome for them. And then the purchase of the NFT is more kind of an instruction. It's not, in my view, exactly an intent in the way like that we view it in terms of the protocol. So yeah, this is something I wanted to add. I don't know if anyone has a perspective on that.
Yeah. So for me, I'll take another perspective as well. I'm thinking like, so the question was, does intents and can intents sort of exist outside of blockchains? And I've really never thought about it. But I think like doing my own research and like kind of learning about it, I think intents have been around for some time, and really it's just a way to describe like specifying an execution path across like many I guess actions, and really breaking down the removing the how instead of you having to go through it, and just like it's just what do you want, right? I think in terms of like real world use cases, and I wouldn't even call it real world use cases, it's just like off-chain use cases. Intent-based networking already exists, and it's something within the space of things like AI, which machine learning can be used to prescribe and perform routine tasks, like different policies and even system events that can essentially verify that goals and actions can be achieved through specific means, right? So I think like intents outside of blockchains can exist, but it's just approached differently.
Thank you. And we almost ran out of time, so I will have my last question, and I will ask you to answer briefly, but this is a very, very, very important question. Why rollups should care about intents and should want to collaborate with intent-affiliated companies and projects?
Yeah, I guess I can start off here, coming from Taiko as well. I think that in terms of like intents and it's scaling up the next wave of user transactions, it's really important that rollups focus on something like this, because it really brings a lot of this adoption. From a DApp perspective, it is very, very interesting because in terms of like use cases, simplifying UI UX becomes endless, right? You can essentially express intents in all kinds of verticals, whether it's in DeFi, GameFi. You're just simplifying the experience for the overall users. And I think there's going to be more and more intent-based applications in the coming future. Even things like GambleFi, wherein you don't have to specifically sign a transaction, even bridging and things like that, where in the future, perhaps we can even have natural language in terms of intents, right? It's sort of risky, but you can just sort of have a chatbot and, express an intent and, hey, trade this for me. Hey, do this for me. And a lot of it can be decentralized. So I think like in that sense, intents offer a new kind of way that we interact with the app. So I think it's just very exciting to see that space grow.
Anyone else?
I can add, but I'm not sure my answer will be valuable to this question. I mean, I don't see a clear reason why rollups themselves should care about intents. I mean, Ethereum validators don't care about intents, and probably rollup block producers also should not care about this. I mean, they are working on different level and solving different problem. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you want, if you think that block producers on rollups should care of this, so probably you should think that validators of Ethereum also should care of this. But I'm not sure anyone will add this kind of functionality. But if you will consider this as a part of any MEV activity, probably they will do this. So yeah, it depends on how do you consider all these intents? Are they subject for MEV or not? Because if yes, then yeah, Ethereum validators, they are like taking care of MEV because it's one of important sources of revenue for them. So then rollup block producers should also take care of them as well as about MEV, or they should not, or they should protect users from MEV, or yeah, it depends.
Absolutely fair. The answer that they shouldn't care or almost shouldn't care is also like absolutely fair. So we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all the speakers, all the guests. Thank you all the listeners. It was like, at least for me, it was a really insightful and exciting discussion. And we went only through part of my questions. So maybe we should have intense part 2 one day. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. That's it.
Thank you for an interesting discussion, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Awesome
you.
stuff.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks all.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.